dragon is at the gates of the Gaulian Empire. Such times breed hard men and women. But there is only one truth. No one survives alone.
That looked amazing. Holy shit. Hello and welcome to a very special Rawsember edition of Meet the Furies. You haven't seen me in a while. I'm Zeke. I work here at Raw Fury as the voice of Fury. And today, for Rawsember, we have a very special guest with us. Welcome, everybody. Anders Lauridsen, I hope I said that right, the lead creator of Skald against the Black Priory, which we just announced that we're collaborating with. Hello, Anders.
Hello, Zeke. Thank you for having me.
That is my utmost pleasure, to say the least. So, we have absolutely just now announced that we're collaborating with you, Anders, on Skald against the Black Priory. Could you quickly run us through what is Skald?
Skald against the Black Priory is a grimdark fantasy RPG that has a very strong retro feel and vibe to it, even though I would say it's a very modern RPG in many ways, especially in terms of the narrative. And I think for most people it will play mostly as a modern RPG in most ways, even though the look of the game is certainly inspired by role-playing games as they looked in the late 80s, early 90s. The color palette, for instance, is slightly restricted. We use a color palette inspired by the Commodore 64 color palette. And sorry, yes.
Oh no, I was just gonna say that's so incredibly cool.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. It's been sort of one of the base pillars when we started the game was to make it a very minimalist game in some senses, and that means doing things like having very low resolution and using a sort of a custom and restricted palette. And so even though the graphics of the game, I mean, if you compare it, if you do a side-by-side comparison of a Commodore 64 game, this game looks like it's, it looks 20 years older. But when you look at it without the side-by-side comparison, I think it's a lot easier to be fooled into thinking, games did used to look like that, even though this game is obviously a little bit more advanced than they actually used to look like. So
yeah, no, but that's so cool. I mean, I'll have to be blatantly honest. I'm a little too young to have grown up with like the Commodore 64 and the likes. However, obviously, especially working in the industry, I've been exposed to it in different ways through either media or just colleagues reminiscing, doing shows like this and talking about games. And like, to me, this looks incredibly accurate to like, well, as you say, it looks like a modern take, but sort of within the confines of, what you could do back then. I'm not sure if Skald would be possible on like an old system.
No, not by any means. It's
right on.
It's doing things that would have been impossible back in the day. Even though a lot of the way we make the graphics for the game is how you would make graphics before you had dedicated graphic cards on computers. But when you made games like that, you needed a very powerful computer to make something.
Right.
And so now I can sort of leverage the more powerful systems we have to do things like procedural weather effects drawn pixel by pixel on the screen at runtime and things like that, which are really fun to work with because it kind of gives you an insight into, oh man, I can just see these guys who usually like Richard Garriott, who worked on games like this in the early 90s. He would give his left hand for the ability to do this stuff that we can now do.
Exactly. And I guess we can mention already, if this is the first you hear about the game and you think it looks cool, you can already play the Prologue on Steam. Because I was going to mention, I haven't played the full Prologue, but I played like a bunch of it. One thing that impressed me like a lot just starting out was like how you've handled field of view. I'm guessing.
Really?
Yeah, I'm guessing that's something that probably wouldn't be possible like on an old system. But just if you play the game, you'll see parts of like the world map will be darkened and out of your view, and also you'll have like light showing sort of where you can be hidden, etc.
Yeah, the funny part is that the underlying system of that is exactly the same way they used to do field of view in old games.
Oh, really?
So even like Ultima 4 had field of view, but the big difference is that we have sort of this creeping darkness.
Yeah.
That it's not, because that would just statically be an entire 16 by 16 pixel tile would either be black or filled in, and it would just like snap from black to filled in, and that's how Skald was to begin with also. But now we've added a lot of sort of effects to make it look a little bit more organic and a little bit more spooky, and I think it adds a lot of atmosphere to the game. So a lot of people comment on that actually. I don't see it myself anymore because I've worked on it for so long, but people appreciate it.
Yeah, no, for me it just looked very fluent and cool. Like I'm like, oh shit, it looks old, but it feels fresh.
Yeah, and just to have it said, just to like do my marketing pitch, I think based on the feedback we have, and Skald isn't a game. Of course, we're catering to a community of people who are really into these kinds of games. Right. But a huge emphasis on making Skald is to make the kind of platonic ideal of a retro RPG accessible to people who didn't like you didn't play them back in the day. Maybe you would never sit down and learn how to play Ultima 4, but by playing Skald, you can maybe get like a little bit of a taste of how these games used to play in the day. Yeah, and that's what we're finding also with that the game gels very well with modern consumers. It has a lot of the things you expect nowadays in modern RPGs. So
the kids love it.
Yeah, kids love it. Beat it up.
So to say, no, I was actually gonna save that comment for later in the stream, but I just wanted to mention now since we're there. Like, yes, playing just a prologue, I felt incredibly like invested and like immersed in the world, even though I've never sort of. I'm sure I have tried at some point, but I've never, lived in a time where these kinds of games were like the best thing you could have. But I still felt like the art, the writing, and everything just drew me in immediately. So I'm incredibly looking forward to playing the full thing, and I'm very happy that we're involved.
A big part of the inspiration for making Skald is to sort of deliver a real role-playing experience in an old sense, not just in terms of having it look like an old role-playing game, but they really feel like a really old-fashioned role-playing game that could almost just as well have been a tabletop role-playing game. And that's why we have such an emphasis on sort of all the text and the storytelling and the narrative, which is a huge part of the game, hugely important.
Yeah,
Skald is a very narrative-heavy game, and I think what a lot of people forget is about the games from the early 90s is that they didn't really have, due to memory limitations, they didn't really have a lot of text in them. The text and dialogue systems were extremely primitive back in the day. So you wouldn't really have the option of having kind of like this almost graphical novels, not graphical novel, but more like an interactive fiction style that Skald has in like the dialogue, where we can really sort of dig into the deep and dark and Lovecraftian and cosmic horror undertones of the universe and sort of the psychology of the people, and that's what gets me ticking, at least.
Yeah, you can tailor everything to tell the story that you want to tell, and we're gonna get way. You mentioned the cosmic horror, etc., and we're gonna get way deeper into like what sort of influences the game has. However, I'm gonna reel it back just a little bit and start with asking a little bit about you, Anders.
Sure.
So yeah, I've been told that you grew up in like the northmost part of Norway. Like it said fishing village. I don't know how accurate that is, but could you tell us a little bit about your place of origin and how that might have like played into the creation of Skald?
Yeah, I grew up in an island, a small city of a couple of thousand inhabitants in the far, far, far north of Norway. So it's really an extreme place. We have winter darkness. We're in an Arctic climate zone. Whoa. So there are no trees up here. We have the midnight sun in the summer. It's very dark and cold all winter, and it's an extreme place in all senses. And and I still live within an hour of where I grew up.
Oh, right on.
Yeah, I'm still in the region, and I would absolutely say that that's something that really influenced me as a creative person, both as both kind of like growing up in a place where everything isn't at your fingertips all the time. So you really learn you have to be creative, or else you don't, or else there's nothing to do. You have to literally be able to just walk around waving sticks around and, you know, playing at being Link from Zelda, or, you know, because that's what we would do. We would play the Zelda games on the NES, and then we would go out and sort of superimpose our vision of how mind-blowing Zelda was on sort of all the miniature landscapes on where we grew up. I remember it very vividly. It was kind of a watershed moment, and you become good at doing things like that, sitting inside and building Legos, because there's nothing to do during the winter. So I would absolutely say that was something that drove me towards gaming, and tabletop games in particular, because this was in the late 80s, early 90s. So gaming PCs, or gaming hardware, wasn't necessarily electronic gaming hardware wasn't as readily available, and that's what got me into tabletop role-playing games and games like Magic the Gathering, and, you know, other geek culture in general, I think.
Right on. Yeah, I think now it just sparked my memory. I think I've had that conversation once before in Meet the Furies, but I think it's like a theory overall as to why, like, Scandinavia, like both Sweden, Norway, Finland, Denmark, like how we're prominent in like tech and also like things like tabletop RPGs, is that we have these long winters, which, you know, obviously now you have technology at the tip of your finger, so you can sort of keep yourself occupied. But in when these technologies and these like games sort of grew out, you know, this is what people sort of filled their time with. Well, mainly like people that were children at the time. So, so I think that's a really strong factor. Like, more so for you probably than someone who grew up in Stockholm, where I'm from. but still, yeah, it sounds like a very similar experience to what you've heard, like, from a lot of Scandinavian game devs overall. Like, you're filling, you know, the lack of, you know, input in your head, I guess, of entertainment and other things that we have so abundantly now, with essentially your own fantasy or learning things.
Absolutely.
Creating.
And I think also kind of a second pillar from growing up where I did that inspired me as a game developer is also, you know, the fact that you're growing up in extremely dramatic landscapes. Extremely dramatic. It's either like storm clouds like nothing you've ever seen before, or it's completely clear outside and you can see northern lights and a million stars, you know, and it's like Fimbulwinter all winter, you know. It's nature that will literally kill you in minutes if you're not careful, you know, like oceans that are, at the most we get 6 degrees in the water in the summer, so if you fall in the ocean you die. I mean, and so you're basically living in kind of like this, you're almost living in a fantasy setting of sort. It's very far away from it's very far away from the experience I think a lot of people, at least in sort of in the West and our core audiences have, where they live in fairly urbanized areas, and they might have different challenges, but it's certainly not as exotic as it is growing up in the high north, I think.
Yeah, fair enough. Like that, I'm from Stockholm, so that, I guess that's pretty forgiving as well. We can bathe in the water in summer. It gets nice. I think like 18 degrees and above, that's bathable to me. Yeah. And also it's not as dramatic as scenic, not so many scenic views, but it's a beautiful city nonetheless. But yeah, back to you and back to Skald. So, like, bringing it back to sort of the beginning, could you tell us a little bit what got you like started in making Skald against the Black Priory? Have you always sort of wanted to create your own game, or has it been something in the back of your head for a while, or did this come later in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been all the way from when I was a kid. I would always make games. That was always something that I did. And then when I got into tabletop role-playing games, I was always a game master. I would always be the one leading the play and writing the adventures. And that was literally all I did, tabletop gaming, for a lot of years. And we did it a lot in my university years. And And then we kind of quit when I graduated and started working, and we got kids, and life happened. So we kind of put the tabletop gaming away a little bit.
On hold.
Yeah, exactly. And I really missed it. I missed my group, and I missed kind of like the creative outlet that it afforded me, because
right.
I think I've always been kind of a creative person. So creating it's not optional for me. It's something I need to do one way or the other. And so I remember very, very distinctly when I was I think I was 25, so I was pretty old, or like relatively speaking. I was actually sitting at my day job, my completely game development unrelated day job, and being kind of a little bit fed up, at least for that day. And I remember thinking to myself, what is this game development thing? Because Minecraft had just come out, so it was kind of in the zeitgeist that was one guy from Sweden had made this incredible thing.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking to myself, what does it take to become a game developer? What do you have to do? What do you have to know? And I started just picking away at it, doing introductory courses on the internet, using simple tools, learning Python, learning to use Game Maker Studio, and doing a lot of other programming projects, learning Java, learning C#, just doing it for a hobby for many, many years. And I started doing games, making small games, or almost not games, almost more like toy projects that you're just doing for yourself to test things. And then very slowly, because I always had it in the back of my mind, if I could make anything, I would make a role-playing game, obviously. And then very slowly, I started making what was basically a dialogue engine. So you could make dialogue or even interactive fiction. And I remember kind of thinking that there's something to this. I enjoy doing this, and I think I have some good ideas. And then I started expanding upon it, and that dialogue engine, the core of that engine, is still in the game actually. And it's that's sort of how Skald came to be. And I started sort of picking at it and sort of trying to unify a vision for what is this game going to be? What can I plausibly make? What do I want to make? And I very quickly sort of landed at things like I wanted to have a reduced color palette to make it possible for me to create my own art, for instance, so I wouldn't rely on having other people to create art. I would prefer a low resolution, because a 16 by 16 tile is very easy to draw even for me. So and then it sort of just spun off from there. And a couple of years later, now I'm a professional game developer, which is just insane to say out loud.
You smile though, so I'm guessing it feels pretty cool, right?
It's pretty damn cool.
Yeah, exactly. We don't have to go too deep into that, but I was actually told that before you became this full-fledged indie developer, that you worked in the public sector in Norway. Is that true?
Yeah. I've had a completely different career. My career has nothing on a fundamental level. It has nothing to do with game development or even IT. So I had a completely different career, and I think most people who know me would never see it coming, because I was pretty tight-lipped with it's been a side project and a hobby for many years, and those two worlds have never mixed.
There you go. I mean, I'm just having presumptions, but it sounds like the type of job that would make you dream of something more creative and making games.
Absolutely. It was a very nice job, and I had really great colleagues and everything like that. But I don't like the office lifestyle. I'm not a cubicle guy. I'm not a water cooler conversation guy. I don't like that. I prefer to be able to work where I want and when I want, and to have a job where I get to be fundamentally creative. And also, I really, besides just the creative as in creating the role-playing aspect, but I also really enjoy the technical aspect and also the business dimension of game design. I enjoy everything about it. I like thinking about it as a business venture. I like writing code. I like solving problems. I like everything about it. So it's a dream come true.
Well, sounds like you're in the right place then, I dare say.
I hope so.
So just quickly, can you tell us a little bit about the team structure? I understand that you started as a fully solo developer, but do you work together with other people now, or is it still a fully solo venture type thing?
No, I'm currently still a solo developer, and I might I'm looking into expanding a little bit when it comes to maybe taking on a business manager at a position at some fraction of a full position.
Right on.
Because it's possible for me to get some. I may be able to leverage some funding to do that and sort of get.
Exciting.
Yeah, it's very cool, but fundamentally, I'm like on the creative side, non-administration side. I'm a solo developer, and I will likely be so throughout the entire project. I have a very good workflow where I collaborate with freelance developers to do, especially some of the more complex art. The art that everything that isn't sort of a little tile on the screen, everything that's like bigger pictures and logos and things like that is made by more or less professionals or extremely talented freelancers at least. And the same goes for the music, and there are also a lot of other services that you need, such as some help with the writing and editing of text, things like that. Yeah, so I have like an ecosystem of people around me, because this project has been going for a couple of years now. So there are a lot of people who are more or less loosely tied to the project that I call on. And I don't see that changing, because Norway is a fairly high-cost country. So it's very risky for such a small project as mine to take people on, because it costs a lot of money, and it would tie up a lot of capital, and there isn't really a budget for it now. It would put me in a risk that I'm not willing to take. I think we've made the game so far. I think we can bring it to port by continuing the way we're doing.
I hear that, and I think that's a really good way of like looking at it. Right on.
It's a way of minimizing risk, at least, and that's sort of a big important thing for me from like a business perspective. It's to not lose my head, because it's very easy to run out and hire your friends and things like that, but it's not a good idea.
Well, I don't want to discourage anyone who's done that, 'cause I mean, I guess it can work out also. But I totally see what you're saying, in that you know, not that I expect that to happen at all here, but like, say if things were to crash and burn, I guess you're the only one who would suffer.
Absolutely.
So I totally see and relate to that mentality. But okay, so run me through it. It's your first week as a solo developer. You've just quit your job. How does it feel to like sit down and write those first lines of code?
It's really, really exhilarating. When people are watching this, I had my last day on my day job the week before the trailer dropped.
Oh, really?
Literally last week was my first week as a free developer, and it's pretty exhilarating actually to know that you are sort of you're moving the ball forward with every line of code you write.
Yeah.
It's what it feels like. You're building your castle one little brick at a time, and it's a really, really cool experience. And I would have to say that obviously having Raw Fury on board from a financial perspective has allowed me to quit my day job, but Raw Fury is also just a fantastic partner and collaborator to have, also on a professional level, in terms of doing things like making the teaser we've been making, helping out with marketing, having someone to spar with on the business side. It's just so even though I'm a solo developer, I feel that my team has grown by at least 6 or 7 people since I signed with Raw Fury. So it's amazing. It's been amazing so far.
That's so awesome, and it's great also that you've already caught on to how effective flattery is with us. I'm just sitting here blushing like, oh, stop it, you.
I'm not known as a person who gives idle flatter. So when I say it's really, really, really good, I genuinely mean it. It's been a really, really good experience for me. But I also think that if I was already working in a team structure where I had a studio on my side, I would probably also be much less dependent on Raw Fury. So, but for me, I work alone. So if I want to chat with someone about the game, I call DJ at Raw Fury and how he's doing. So they're kind of my team in a sense in that way, and it's really good to have people like that. So people are really talented. And
that sounds perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super happy. Super happy. Get signed by Raw Fury, y'all. That's the takeaway.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Everyone out there making your first game, get signed by Raw Fury. Things are cool.
Let's do it.
Right on. But okay, so I mean, you've been going for a few years, and there's been a little bit of a journey already, even before you dropped in our welcoming lap. So can you tell us a little bit? As I understand, you did a Kickstarter, and then you interacted with Indiegogo, and then you sort of connected with John. Can you walk us through the timeline a little bit?
We started a couple of years ago with the game. I worked on it for about a year after I sort of started realizing that, after things started coalescing and I started realizing that, okay, I'm going to make a role-playing game. And then I kind of thought that it would be really fun to do crowdfunding because it was very much in the zeitgeist, and I kind of thought that it's going to be one of those experiences, in a couple of years where it's been fun to have done one,
right.
Which is a horrible motif for doing
bucket list.
But I mean, it was a way to start, and it was fairly successful, at least considering that I had literally zero budget. I did everything myself, and it was my first time, and it was almost just to see if it could be done, and it was pretty successful. We got quite a few backers for the game, and we funded it in 24 hours.
That's amazing.
And yeah, it was a really, really cool experience. It was a really fun experience to do, and I would do it again for Skald 2. It's coming to Kickstarter, so watch this space.
Keep your eyes out.
But we did the Kickstarter, and then we did Indiegogo in demand, which is just a way of making a crowdfunding campaign that doesn't have to end. So
right.
They kind of take over from where your Kickstarter ends, and so. And the point is that by doing that, we got a lot of people talking about the game. And so we managed to create a really good community, which was hugely important, and also got quite a bit of funding. And that means that we had some fun. We had matching funds which meant that we could apply for a stipend from the Norwegian government, which is set up in such a way that they support things like game development, for instance, business areas that are kind of focus areas or areas that the Norwegian government wants to get better at.
Fair.
And those are all set up in such a way that you kind of need matching funds. They will pay 50% of something if you can pay the other 50%. So once you get the ball rolling and once you get a little bit of funding in, then it becomes a lot easier to get more funding in, which is the irony, obviously. But that's the way it works. Yeah. So and I kept working at it, hacking away at it. It kept taking longer than planned, but it also kept getting cooler than I thought.
There you go. I mean, then you're fine.
Yeah. I'm so long as my community still puts up with me, I'm super happy, and they do. They're awesome. And so I started getting approached by publishers, and I quickly realized that publishing is really cool, but it's also kind of a way of giving you enough rope to hang yourself with if you're not careful. There's a lot of, even if people have the very best of intentions, there's a lot of things that can go wrong with a publisher.
For sure.
So I started doing some research and looking into if I was going to pick a publisher myself, something that seemed both realistic but also seemed like something that was a good fit for me in terms of culture and ethics, previous game catalog, geographic location. And Raw Fury very quickly caught my eye. So Raw Fury was hands down literally number one on my list. It was my...
Oh yeah, brother.
Yeah, it was. And so I got in contact with Johan, and we went back and forth. I had some other publishers who were already on the line, but I really wanted to go with Raw Fury, and I kept kind of poking Johan and saying, we're kind of looking at some term sheets here. Is this something you would be interested in? And Johan was, yeah, it looks pretty cool. You should take what they're offering if they're offering you something, but I'll look at it. And then suddenly he said, well, since I live in socialist utopia, I'm now taking 6 weeks off for a summer holiday. Bye-bye.
See you in 6 weeks.
Exactly. And I thought, oh man, that ship has sailed. And but I managed to sort of keep the ball rolling, and then I got an offer after the summer holiday, and I got in touch with Johan again, and I said, okay, it's happening now. I would like to, can you look at this one more time?
Yeah.
And he did, and he showed the game off internally, and it clicked with quite a few people in Raw Fury, and the rest is history.
That's amazing, and that sounds like Johan.
Yeah, it does.
It does. It's like, fuck off. See you in 6 weeks. Whatever.
Yeah, I got complete experience.
I got kimchi to eat and children to look after.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
exactly. Yeah.
No one eats more kimchi than Johan. At least that's my headcanon. So you mentioned, you mentioned your community like being created early. Do you have a special place? Do you have like your own Discord, or is it Steam for? Like, where does your community live, and where do you talk to them?
Well, the community has always sort of had Discord as its main hub.
Right.
So that's where the core community is. It's where I'm easiest to reach and engage with on a face-to-face basis.
Right.
I'm always on the Discord, and I literally chat with people there literally every day. So and it's a pretty big community. We've I think we're in about 600 now. 600 isn't big, but it's big for a small.
It's pretty big.
Yeah, it's for a strange little game
people.
like this. It's pretty big. Yeah, it is. It is. So it's a lively community, and it's kind of a hub for I would say RPG adjacent hobbies.
Right.
It's kind of So kind of like retro computing RPGs, but also tabletop RPGs, modern RPGs, fantasy in general. So it's kind of a hub for nerd culture, and it's a really, really good and friendly community. So I hope everyone comes and visits. But I can also see there's also, after I published the demo on Steam, there's also numbers that show me that there is also a lot of Steam is also a very effective platform for community management, because there's a lot of activity on the Steam forums, especially in periods when I post updates and things like that. So we'll probably once Raw Fury gets more actively involved in the day-to-day, I think Steam will likely also be a pretty vibrant community in its own right.
Well, we're gonna do our very best to make it so, for damn sure. Right on. Have it's fine if you don't have any examples on top of your head, but has there been any like special feedback from the community that's actually ended up like changing or at least altering the game in some way?
Yeah, I think it's important to keep in mind that the community has been playing the game since basically day one, because all of the backers have had access to demos at different stages in development, and we've also had public demos out for quite some time now. Right. So it's extremely community driven. I could point to, I mean, it's pretty, the community is where we get the feedback for the game. Literally, I make iterations of the game, I put it out there, and the community just goes to town on it, and it gives excellent feedback and very constructive criticism. So it's they've been really, really good at that. So this is a community-driven project for sure.
That's so cool to hear. Like I work mostly with social media these days, but I've done my fair share of community work in my years. So it makes me very happy to hear about, especially a vibrant and sort of organically grown community around a cool project.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because those are always like the best ones. Like it's delightful with the ones that you sort of grow more actively, but the ones that sort of just gather around, a unifying interest are my favorite ones to see.
Yeah, I think the clue is to make it so that people have a vested interest in the product you're making, and having people be able to contribute to the project is the best way to have them become stakeholders in it. So and that's always been the strategy for the community. Have the community be really be an active part, not just on paper. Have them really be an active part in the development.
And no matter who you are, really, I'm pretty certain any project will be better off with that sort of engagement and people being involved.
100%.
Right on. But all right, we touched upon this a little bit earlier, and then I wanted to jump back on script. But so the game is very heavily influenced by, the RPGs and games of the 80s. Again, a little bit before my time. But what would you say are like the main influences of Skald?
I think on a surface level, at least, a lot of people will see that they are very similar to games like Ultima 4, Ultima 5, the Magic Candle series, the Gold Box series, because those are all very similar in the way the game looks and also partly the gameplay. But if you play the game a little bit and you play with the game and you sort of delve into it, I think you'll see that the way the game uses dialogue and the way the storytelling works in the game is probably more inspired by the Infinity Engine games like Baldur's Gate 1, Baldur's Gate 2, Planescape Torment is obviously a huge inspiration, the new Pillars of Eternity games.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so there's a lot of that in this game as well. And at this point, I think that if you reskin the game, if you remove like it's a very eclectic RPG. It takes things. There's some of Skyrim in it even, you know.
Oh,
so
shit.
yeah, I mean, because I really like RPGs, and I don't see any reason to. I enjoy making them. I enjoy making systems for the game, and I don't really see any reason to say that, nah, it wasn't like this in Ultima 4, so it won't be like this in this game.
Yeah.
We don't do that. We have an emphasis on having the game be a good tool for storytelling, and then also on top of that we have some visual constraints and things like that. But to have it be good and an expressive tool for telling the kinds of stories that I want to tell, which are kind of dark, mature fantasy stories. That's the game I want to make, so that's the game I'm making, and I can do that because I'm alone.
You're like, I can do whatever the fuck I want.
I can.
Amazing. And
Yeah.
I think you mentioned earlier also there is also a heavy influence of cosmic horror also, right?
Yeah, I would absolutely say that the game is cosmic. It's very much in the cosmic horror genre. We say it has very Lovecraftian undertones, but
Right.
It's true and it's not true, because Lovecraft now is in the Creative Commons, so you can absolutely make literally a Lovecraft game and use his mythos for your game, and that's not the case with our game. Just to be clear with that, we have our own proprietary homemade setting.
Exactly.
But cosmic horror is so much more than H.P. Lovecraft, and probably the biggest reason we use his name is that the name is very recognizable. It's basically a shorthand for saying we have cosmic horror.
It gives people an idea what to expect, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't think people reading it will I think everyone will recognize it as having kind of a cosmic horror tone, but I don't think people necessarily will think that it has a very Lovecraftian tone, to put it like that.
Right on.
Yeah. So there's a lot of inspiration actually from, for instance, TV shows like True Detective is.
Oh shit.
Yeah, kind of like the tone and the beats of the story, and so there's a lot of influence from things that are, cosmic horror, but not H.P. Lovecraft necessarily. But then again, it all goes together in a sense. So yeah, yes and no, but it's very much a cosmic horror game. Absolutely.
I hear that. That's awesome. You mentioned also that you love RPGs. Just one of these quick little interview questions. Do you have a favorite RPG of all time?
I think computer RPG.
Whichever you prefer.
Yeah, let's do computer RPG. I think that there are a lot of them that are really good for different qualities. But I think, like, if I had to choose, Baldur's Gate 1 is really high up on my list, actually. I really, really like Baldur's Gate 1 because it's so incredibly charming.
Right on.
And, I mean, Might and Magic 6 is also very, very good, but it's bad in some ways, but it's one of those games that I have in my fingers to such a degree that I can just I can look past all the chaff.
Yeah, I mean, we all have those.
Absolutely.
I mean, oh sorry.
No, please.
No, I was just gonna say also, like, it feels like sort of the resurgence of RPGs. Maybe like more so tabletop, etc. But like in the past few years, like RPGs have just sort of boomed everywhere. Like,
hugely.
Is this something that makes you excited?
Very much so. I'm in all aspects of my career as a game developer. My motto has always been that a rising tide lifts all boats. So whenever indie games are doing well, whenever indie RPGs, whenever AAA RPGs, tabletop RPGs, whenever they are doing well, it helps all of us. Because the market is unlimited. Everyone would like an RPG if they were just served the correct RPG. You just haven't played the correct RPG yet if you don't think you like them. Everyone would like an RPG. So
I totally believe that.
Yeah, I think so too. So for me, and also like from a from more of a nerdist perspective, I also think it's fantastic that fantasy and gaming is entering the popular consciousness in a more acceptable way. I think that's fantastic. I'm super happy that my kids have been able to grow up in being exposed more to some of the different tabletop or computer games that because for instance, for me, I have two girls. I have two daughters, and I think they're being exposed to a whole different segment of sort of literature and entertainment than my sister was that when we were growing up, just for comparison. So I think it's fantastic.
That's excellent. Yeah, and I sadly did not grow up so much with tabletop RPGs and whatnot, and everyone that does, it just seems to just add like layers of creativity to sort of how you embrace, writing or just like shaping stories in general. So I think it's a healthy thing for like anyone to engage with.
Zeke, I would say hands down, if you are a young person looking to get into game development, if you think game development, or I would almost say like any creative entertainment industry thing, if you think that's interesting, one of the most low-hanging important tips I can give you is find a role-playing group, play a tabletop role-playing game, and if you can even manage to game master a little bit, do it. It's going to give you a frame of reference that's really, 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 really important. I just know because I spend so much time interfacing with other creatives and having that shorthand of saying, this is low level play. This is like, okay, that's a bugbear cave. Just having like these words or these shared experiences, or it's hugely helpful. Yeah,
and you start thinking about, I guess, flow of a story, etc. Like, it's fine to here we'll have some little distracting thing, and then we'll go back to the greater narrative.
Exactly, you do. It changes the way your mind works, especially being a game master and kind of having to present stories or information in an interactive way. That's a hugely important takeaway. So that's my number one tip. Play tabletop role-playing games.
Listen up, video gamers. You heard it here. Yeah. Maybe not first, but you heard it here again if you heard it before. Play tabletop RPGs. Game Master.
Do it.
Do you have any... we're going to start slowly but surely wrapping this up. Has there been any... like, what's been, like, the biggest surprise in game development, like, in the way you do now, as opposed to, like, game mastering and whatnot? Has there been anything that's sort of taking you off guard, either in a positive or negative way?
I don't think there have been really any surprises, because I try to be very methodical, so I don't really... because I don't like to be surprised. But I think one of the things that I'm very... pleased about that could have gone both ways is that the community and the people who I'm interacting with have all been very, very kind. There's almost no trolling. There is, because there are so many shitty people on the internet, and you could fall
sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I work there every day.
Yeah, exactly. And I think everyone spends time on Twitter knows what we're talking about. But people have just been super supportive. And just like so cool with this strange little niche project, which is probably why the people who bother to follow it are cool, because they are already predisposed to like it. But nonetheless, people have just been awesome. So that's the biggest.
That's so
surprise.
fucking sweet. Well, I mean, from where I'm sitting, Skald is looking to shape up to be an amazingly both unique and just thrilling RPG to play through. Is there anything, and no spoilers now for damn sure, but is there anything especially in the game that you've created that you look forward to players experiencing when they jump into the world?
I think it's more one of those things where I really enjoy seeing people being able to express themselves in the game. For instance, when I put the demo out there, just for comparison, the prologue that you played, the prologue can be finished easily in 20 minutes, and I thought people were going to play it for 20 minutes, and most people did. But there are people out there who's hands down played the prologue for 20+ hours.
Oh wow.
Yeah, just like literally exploring every inch of every map, and when they're done with that, start looking for ways to sort of to break and exploit the game and just grind experiences to see how far level they can get. And seeing things like that, to sort of see that the game and the community is taking on a life of its own. That's like, for me as a creative person, that's the biggest reward I can get.
That's amazing. To me, again, someone who works with community, that sounds like you've already have proof that you created something very, very special.
Absolutely.
Well, Anders,
Absolutely.
we cannot wait to see this beautiful product over the finish line, and we're thrilled to be part of it. Everyone, go on Steam right now, and if you search for Skald, you'll probably find it. But the full name, Skald Against the Black Priory, has the prologue out right now, so you can jump straight into what we're talking about and see for yourself why this is so incredibly special. And also, if you're just sitting here enjoying the show, don't go anywhere. We got some beautiful gameplay lined up that you can sit back and enjoy if you just prefer to sort of lean back and watch things. And again, Anders, thank you so incredibly much for joining me today. Do you have any last words you want to say?
Yeah. Can we just interject that the demo, the prologue, has been up for quite some time now, and it represents the game in an earlier state. So even though it's very representative, there are going to be a lot of changes to a lot of aspects of it. So just take it with a pinch of salt and enjoy, play it for 20 hours, and have fun.
There you go. I still think it's amazing. So I mean, just know that the final game will be even better.
Yes, exactly.
So that's all we're here to do. Anders, this has been such a blast. Thank you so much, and everyone, happy to be back with a little bit more Meet the Furies in my festival. You don't actually see me right now, but I'm wearing a cute little Santa hat, so in a true Rawcember fashion. There we go. Anders,
okay.
Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I'm sure we'll do more streams and talk more about Skald in the months to come. And
we'll talk soon, Zeke.
And yeah, so everyone else, stick around for some more gameplay, and we'll see you when we see you. Have a good one.